Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank, mixed with historic whole. David, it's nice to have you back on again. It's been a few years.
Years, months, days, hours. It doesn't matter anymore in this age of journalism what unit you use.
Journalism. What is journalism? Journalism used to be writing it down on a piece of paper, submitting it somewhere, and hoping to God it didn't say the word opinion on it. But isn't all journalism opinions?
Anymore, it kind of seems like it. Did you saw that article I'm talking about, right? It was like some reporting in like Oklahoma. It was like residents wait thousands of minutes to get into the hospital or something, and people were pointing out it was like, why didn't you just say hours, like,
Hmm. Yeah,
or
it's
days, like thousands of minutes? I don't know.
Stephen King, the author, actually tweeted how there was like 1,000 something people that died in Florida of COVID in one day. And then he retweeted like the next day, I'm so sorry. That was over a week or so. And I was like, yeah, about to say if it was
Yeah.
like 1,000 something people that died in a day, I think we'd all would have fucking heard about that on the news.
Yeah, man, and like it's what's really crazy is like with a lot of the vaccine stuff. It's there's some people out there that like I don't you know like that I would expect would have been vaccinated that actually haven't gotten it, and like it's interesting too because like everything's getting so hostile. You know what I mean? Like they're ramping up all these like mandates and like the whole thing with companies over 100 people and all this stuff. You know, so it's just interesting because I don't know, like I talked to some people that I would think would be vaccinated, you know, even based on their politics or whatever, like, but they're not. And some people might even, I think, put up the front like they are just to for social acceptance. You know, it's really weird.
I think this is the first time ever that it's been clear that news or whatever you want to call it has a bias and has a certain like because it's obviously me and you can point out certain things, but for the common person that's not trying to observe these certain qualities of anything, like CNN, for instance, was talking about the third booster shot, and then they brought up is Israel or whoever that had like the giant spike that happened a month ago. And they said, oh, the COVID cases are lower than ever daily now. It's like, well, no shit. If everyone in your house gets the fucking flu, then your numbers are going to be high up for the first week. And then anything after that is just going to drop because you're not going to get it again. So, but they were
Yeah.
pushing that onto the booster shot. But the crazy thing was, if you don't, let's not even look at the pandemic. Let's look at the fact of like the 9/11 shit. How many articles was I seeing? And Trump's trending, I think, on Twitter now. He was just trending on the Moonies. Did you see his speech about the Moonies?
No.
So apparently
I,
there's like this cult or something like that. And everyone was wondering why Trump wasn't at this thing when he was like narrating a UFC fight. But so the article says former President Donald Trump delivers a virtual address at a conference for the Unification Church, a religious movement where members are sometimes referred to derivatively as Moonies. And everyone's talking about how Bush kind of was relating it to the Capitol Hill thing. But this is his stupid thing, which I find is hilarious. But I want to see if I can play it on here without it. I want to thank the Universal Peace Federation and in particular Dr. Hawk Jahan Moon, a tremendous person, for her incredible work on behalf of peace all over the world. Her story of escaping from North Korea at 5 years old at the outset of the Korean War is an amazing example of the power of faith in Almighty God. I also want to thank her late husband, Reverend Moon, for founding the Washington Times, an organization for which I have tremendous respect and admiration. I don't know because everyone that commented on that was talking about the fact of like that this thing for 50 years people had to escape this horrible cult. And then you're seeing all these things when it comes to like divisiveness. And I have talked to ex-cult people, so I know the whole story. Like even Christianity can be people leaving that. Sometimes it can be a little bit too serious where you dive into like the back room part where the beaded curtain is, and then people have bad experiences with that. But it's just very interesting to see like with all the bot accounts that are on Twitter. But I used to think Twitter was a place obviously with a lot of trash talking, but I never knew it was so divisive when it came to politics. I mean, it boils down to like even if you want to go back to the Biden laptop situation, you know what I mean? you start to look at like I think somebody pointed this out to me. They go, why is crack less of a sentence than if you got caught doing, or no, cocaine is less of a sentence than when you're caught with crack. And it's like, well, isn't cocaine or whatever, isn't that just crack? Isn't that just like a different version of that or something like that? But
Yeah,
apparently,
it's like cracks modified cocaine, basically.
so like a couple of weeks before the whole Biden stuff came out with him doing lines of cocaine where they somehow got a recording on his computer. I'm like, why do you even have that recording? But
Yeah, they had a recording of him smoking crack,
they had
like just a
I think it was
crack
just
pipe.
cocaine.
He like there's one the video. It might not be a video. I know there's a picture. There was one of him in the bathtub. Like that was going. It's still going around. You go like, you like go to the White House's like any of their tweets. Like people are just posting Hunter with a crack pipe in his freaking mouth, like under the tweets.
But I think
Like
this
it's
is
everywhere.
boiled down to where like not like we're definitely not journalists or we're not broadcasters. We're kind of just shooting the shit and then talking about things that are going on. But it's like we were saying with people acting with emotion rather than thought. Now I'm hoping people are starting to think a little bit and starting to notice the divisiveness when it comes to like just the news, even social media. Everything that you see is always a Trump thing that's trending, always talking shit on him, always doing something where you have to scroll down to actually get some like information. Like now the lab is finally being talked about, and but you still can't talk about Fauci without someone losing their shit.
Yeah, yeah, and two, like I think any focus on Trump is really just to go to numbers. That's all they're trying to do with Trump. They're not actually like there's nothing he's doing that's really newsworthy besides just like going around talking to people and talking shit. Like but he does numbers when they report on him in the media. Like everyone can be go, oh, this asshole, you know what I mean? Like and like give all the Reddit nerds like some fucking red meat to chew on. It's like without him, like they really do suffer on trying to get people to pay attention. He really is kind of like that sort of feel like kind of a in a way like Howard Stern was like that sort of like had it just in such an audience dedicated to hating him, like that almost is what made him, you know gave him the numbers to make him as big as he was. So anyway, um yeah, I mean obviously you mentioned their 9/11, which was yesterday. I don't know when this will come out obviously, but we're recording it the day after 9/11. And you mentioned Bush, and like this is something I've been actually talking about, ranting about on Facebook, probably to all of my friends on their annoyance, but like, and just to like kind of like these long rants, like just paragraphs of bullshit. But one of the things I brought up recently was like look at Afghanistan. You look at you just like look at the whole sequence of stuff. Um, and how this occurred. And I remember, like, I was, old enough to remember the narratives and the media reporting and how this was going down back then. Um, and so people like to always frame this as like, oh, they were just like they were caught off guard, like they had no idea. It was like, nah, that's not true. Um, Bin Laden had done several attacks leading up to 9/11. One of them was the USS Cole, which was basically a suicide bomber that drove into the side of a Navy ship. And that, right there was a pretty big act, of aggression against, U.S. military. I believe people lost their lives, service members lost their lives there. They had intelligence that in hand in August saying, Bin Laden plans to attack the U.S. They always fall back on this. Their bullshit is, and I say it's bullshit. I mean, it's up for debate. They say, well, we didn't have specific details. Like we just knew that he was talking about doing something. It was like, look, I don't, I don't think that might be true, but at the same time, there's this whole thing with the FBI investigation. They were looking at two of the hijackers like prior to this. Uh, there's all sorts of shady stuff happening with like movements of money and shorts. I don't buy some of the economic stuff because people are always shorting and stuff and
Are we turning
pulling
this
all
into a
sorts of
9/11 discussion? I did a 5.5 hour episode on it. Um,
Well, like I just want to comment on something like with Bush and the speech because there's a story here that goes 20 years long that these fuckers can't admit they're wrong, about their approach to certain things, right? So not like these, they drugged their feet on 9/11. Obviously they had some of these guys in their fucking sights, right?
Hmm.
They were looking at them, but the shit goes down, the tragedy occurs, and they use it to, you know, do the Patriot Act, all of that bullshit, suspend the Fourth Amendment, go into Afghanistan, do the 20-year long war, also by proxy Iraq, uh, and from there, just ramping up the capabilities to the drone strikes. Like it's all connected. It's all has to do with the defense industry and the money just like pouring into that, and all of this in the name of protection, right? In the name of safety. Like this is done to keep us safe, we're told.
I don't think
Uh,
I'm wrong in speculating on the fact of how much money have we spent working on this country compared to how much we've spent to be in other countries. There was
yeah,
a picture.
exactly.
Well, there was a picture I saw that it was like how much money that was like 11.3 something trillion dollars that could easily been, given to building up our country, but it's been spent in war efforts doing stuff that we shouldn't be doing. And then it showed China doing the same exact shit. And China built up their fucking foundation, and that's why they're able to produce so much. I'm like, I I'm not a fan, like, because I've had a lot of people talk about like, look at all the and I've been trying to get out of the politics. I've been out of it for like a week and a half now. Um, but I always end up getting because I see it's not hard to see the writing on the wall, and I'm not saying there's a definitive idea of what it is, but I'm like, it's just not. It's just about questioning. I mean, just question where a lot of shit's going from. There's a lot of stuff that's just easily the wool's always pulled over our eyes because we never go super deep into understanding what the fuck's going on. I mean, there are people like us or people that like this that know the bad shit the government's done in the past, but it, to think that we're above doing it again. Like, I mean, Fauci had the same shit happen when he did the AIDS cure thing or whatever he was talking about. The same shit. There were people putting up signs of saying liar Fauci in like 2017. And then now it's the same shit. And I think even in that short amount of time, he tried to use the same exact route of like lying and manipulation. But this is the first time ever in history that our fucking exposure of the media, exposure of all the fallacies that are going on into our politics, it's an amazing time. For an end, this is the best end. I love this end.
Yeah.
This is an apocalypse end. I love it.
Well, it is in a way kind of like with the so much information now and everything's so open. Yeah, there is kind of this sort of mask off sort of thing, like the emperor has no clothes, is kind of playing out because everybody can see. And before it was only like you only could see what the media, and it was carefully curated
Yeah.
for only you only saw what you were supposed to see. But now it's like a lot of it's just full mask off. Um and back to like I know it's kind of like rambling there about 9/11, but like the point I'm really trying to make about it is like you look at like Bush is the architect of the bad ideas, not necessarily the man himself, but the administration, Cheney, Rumsfeld, a lot of those guys, um, architects of these bad ideas of getting involved in the Middle East, expanding all these surveillance programs, expanding like drone programs, and basically, wreaking havoc across, the world, causing this, and that more than anything, I think drives anti-American sentiment. Some people disagree. They're like, no, well, screw what the rest of the world thinks about us. I'm like, it actually does matter, and there's a way to do it that is strong and not necessarily authoritarian. And that's the whole thing. So these fuckers are very authoritarian minded. They can't be wrong, and like you see it now, with the whole thing with the Capitol and like Bush's speech where he's relating like domestic terrorists to Islamic terrorists, and talking about how like he's basically turning all of those bad ideas that we had aimed at the Middle East on the country itself, because they can't be wrong. Like they can't admit, oh, well, these authoritarian tactics really, like, look at the waste of money and the waste of lives and resources, and we really don't have anything to show for it. Rather than just like admit and own up to it, they can't. They have to be like, no, this is the right way to do things, is like, blowing up innocent people, with drones, and spying on them with impunity, and really just, using invading their privacy to keep the supremacy of our government in place, is those are the ideas that they're operating on. And it's really sad because a lot of people, because it's so partisan, kind of just kind of go along with it. They're like, oh, I am okay with this brand of authoritarianism because that's what my side believes in. And I'm just like, no, you should call it out no matter what side it is. It doesn't matter.
You
And
know what
so I don't care who's saying the bad idea. I'm going to call out the bad idea. And
you know
they're
what I,
full of them.
yeah. Well, I think, and I've been trying to think about this for a while, but I think in 2012 was the first time that we really ever saw the people actually get the person they want appointed into office. Like it was like a giant majority of people that just wanted Obama into office, besides the people that maybe didn't. Because I mean, that was the big push. There was a lot of people uniting together to get Obama into office because they all thought he was going to make change as much as he said he was going to. And I don't think it's people say we haven't recovered. Like people's minds broke when Trump became president. I mean, a lot of people are just still like just they're never going to let it end. They're going to be 80 years old bitching about the guy after he's long gone.
Yeah.
And I just think that right now we're dealing with a system that was not, I mean, forever, for how many presidents we had before Obama or before 2012, it was always kind of like this is who the president's going to be. This is maybe voter fraud. People always bring up with Trump. I was like, but to think that it didn't sway a certain way before 2012, and then suddenly you got every single person talking about how they wanted Obama into office, and man, I look at it now like what we're dealing with Biden and all these things. I'm like, why haven't we seen Kamala Harris in a while? Why haven't we we haven't really seen a whole lot. We're seeing more Jen Psaki than anything. And I think this has just been a whole entire like slowly like the controls are trying to be grabbed back by the government again to where they're like, okay, the people elected all these people, and now we're slowly starting to see the shift back to what it was before. I feel like now that people aren't going to know what to vote. Next election, I don't know if anybody's going to really vote a whole lot. I mean, right now, a lot of people don't really give a shit about where they're living at.
Yeah. And, you know, Obama, both elections he really did crush it. I mean, 2008, I mean, he absolutely ran away with it. I don't
Yeah,
think,
maybe 2008, not 2012.
2012, he still crushed it. I mean, like both times, McCain stood absolutely no chance. Like Bush and Cheney and all them had just trashed the Republican reputation at that point. Like, there was no universe in which the Republicans were going to win that election. Like, they just through the Afghanistan and Iraq, like, uh yeah, like people were done, because like there was just too much dishonesty and lies, and like, and with Obama coming in being like, we're going to change stuff, like this is going to be different, we're going to be transparent, they're going to support whistleblowers and that sort of thing. And like that's what, like, Snowden, Edward Snowden, really bought into that, and believed in that, and that's why he was working at CIA, I think at that time, but he contracted with NSA and did all that stuff, and saw kind of what they were up to and like the level of access they had, with impunity, just like with no congressional authorization, basically, to just look at people's private lives. And
Well, it's going to
you
happen
know,
again. The infrastructure bill. They're going to give you Wi-Fi. Everyone's like, oh, cool. Now the cable companies can't gouge your prices without fixing your internet. They just keep saying an outage in your area. I'm like, yeah, but if you're letting the government control Wi-Fi or help make better connections for your Wi-Fi systems, now you're just accepting the fact that they're going to track everything that you fucking do. At least now we get a little warning or something that we always hit accept or something about tracking. But man, I would like to take the blue pill. I'd like to go back to where way before any. I wish I could erase all the information we know about everything that's been exposed about our government, because I feel like living in a mindless state was way easier than what it's living in now. Because the main thing I try and support with people is the fact that if we can all come together on the same basis of something, we see change. People are more powerful than anything if we all can stand together and truly link arms and go against a certain topic. But everyone, dude, I don't know if it's because of it's our government or it's other governments that are working into our things or bot accounts or whatever the fuck it is. You might create bot accounts because you want a bunch of yes men supporting your opinion, but then now you're fucking up every single person's brain out there of like what's real or not. Like Stephen King having to retweet something or correct himself after making a false claim about something. A lot of people only saw the first tweet. They did not see him come back out and say that. And then as soon as they did, people commented and said, "Oh, you're fucking misinformation." It's like a minute ago you just liked his fucking tweet, but now he doesn't agree with what your bias is. And it's like, are we so subjective? And it's acting like like we talked about our second episode. It's more about acting with emotion than it's acting with thought. It's not about being wrong. It's like with the lab thing. I had people call me a fucking idiot for even suggesting that it came from there, calling me a conspiracy theorist. It's a documentary on demand right now. You can watch all about the fucking lab where they literally say, we have never had a lab or we've never had a bat at this lab. And then some dude goes, oh, well, here's your video when you opened up your lab in 2018 and it's showing a person holding a fucking bat. And they were like, no comment and walked away. What are we fucking saying? I am not trying to get into the politics shit, but I really wish people would just start being like, hey, there's no definitive answer on anything. You want to say we live in a dome? Sure. You want to say we don't live in a dome? Sure. Just fucking take the pills and shut the. I don't know. I'd rather just go back to sleep.
Yeah, right. Ignorance is bliss. Now it's funny. On the latest Matt and Shane's secret podcast, they just kept saying, "No, we don't want to get political." And then like the next thing they would say would be like, "But like abortion is totally bullshit." Like they would just like kept saying they didn't want to get political, and then kept getting political. Yeah, and honestly, I feel like our conversations just always gravitate towards that stuff. This is like kind of what we just talk about. We don't always have to talk about the heavy fucking like political. There's plenty of other stuff going on in the world, but yeah, I mean, think it's just entertaining. It's on the forefront of people's minds. I spend time on Twitter. That's what a lot of bullshit on Twitter is dedicated to. You know what I mean? Um,
It's I mean, I just wish there was more of a common place for creatives because I think the initial inspiration for creativity was like that you can create any content you want to create, make it as your own as you want it to be, anything you want to say. But now, whenever I watch something, it's like I'm always hearing someone say, now this is a joke, and then they go into the joke, and it kind of takes out the wind of the joke. And I'm like, why is he doing it? And you start to realize it's self-censorship. And I think that's one of the craziest things. It's like what made this country the greatest thing for a lot of people that are not from this country that always talk about the one thing they're jealous of that we have, and that's freedom of speech. Well, what's your freedom of speech if you're afraid to say something on a concept if you're going to end up getting taken off a platform? I've had so many episodes where someone starts going into a certain type of medicine drug you can't say, and I'm like, don't, because it then it's now you're going to be taken off that platform. You're going to be limited unless people are going to see you. And I think even if it's like, as long as you're not talking shit about somebody, like hurting somebody's feelings to where someone's going to be impacted if they hurt themselves. But then if I even suggest that, like making it so you're banning content that talks shit on somebody, maybe personally as a person or saying they're horrible, whatever, making up lies about them, then you have to understand the goalpost. It doesn't just stop there. It eventually starts to spread out. And I think there's all these ideas and all these things that we go against, but there's no science anymore. There are people that make up ridiculous ideologies. I actually brought up in an episode. I think you might like this. So I don't know if you ever heard of the conceptual penis study. Did I ever tell you about that?
I don't think so.
So
Enlighten me.
let me see if I can find the article. Okay, so I mentioned this on a previous recording, so I'll just give you the cliff notes of it. But so it's this. I think me and you talked about how I told you about there was a guy that made a study about a person that spent a year and a half in a dog park 8 hours a day watching the ratio of male dogs humping male dogs and male dogs humping female dogs.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
sounds familiar.
To initially say that all dogs are gay because there was a more of a ratio of male dogs. It was a fake study, but it was just a factor of the school wouldn't go against anything that goes against society standards. Well, the conceptual penis as a social construct. So it's talking about how the penis is technically a social construct of masculinity and is actually damaging because if a man sits with his legs wide open, he's technically implying that he's raping the air. And it was just this bullshit study that this guy just suggested and put it into this cognate social sciences thing that ended up getting peer reviewed and then published in an article, eventually meaning that if you have a dick, it actually ends up in turn messing up with climate change. And in turn, more men that are alive are conceptually climate change is caused by penises. And that was the whole fucking study. And it's a fake study. But I'm like, then what's science? I know so many academics that just talk about the fact of like, there is no more science anymore. There's archaeology programs that are no more. There's different, and it's going to keep going. And I'm like, at this point, I think the safest bet is to say science isn't fact. science is just full of hypotheticals and it's just like a religion. Why are we going to try and destroy science if it's just a bunch of people trying to come to a conclusion of what's their own reality? And I'm starting to question what is even my own reality.
Well, it's interesting. Like you bring up something interesting there. It's something I've noticed, and I don't think it's a mystery to anybody that's really got their eyes open, and trying to really look at the world in a fair way. It's that like people with agendas are using science as a means to sort of bring about like collective action, or like use it as an excuse for collectivism, right? Like the whole idea, see, they were doing it with climate change. It's like, well, this isn't about you, as an individual, right? This is about all of us, and we need to protect the planet so we can all live here. And it's this whole collective idea, right, that they're pushing with science. you know, Whether or not climate change is happening is really irrelevant to the method that they're using, right? Like, I'm not saying I believe or don't believe in climate change. What I'm saying is this is just how they're using science to push that. Like, and whether or not I think there's still questions about whether or not we would have any ability to alter the composition of the planet. I feel like that's a pretty tall order and pretty arrogant, to think that we have that level of control over the environment. Um, you know, I, but and I don't think signing a piece of paper between a bunch of pompous leaders across the world is going to make a fucking difference. But I think really what's funny about the whole thing is they push this sort of collective action. We need all of the world's leaders and all of us to put us under laws so that we all collectively do these things. Whereas in reality, the real answer, rather than forcing people, you know, through authoritarian measures to try and fix the environment, it's the individual level is actually where you make the change. So it's like if people on it, and this is the thing, this is like, if you really believe in climate change, you really want to stop it, then on the individual level, you need to show that. And if you don't manifest your belief and stop consuming, unnecessary things, only live within your means, only grow your own stuff naturally, all of the stuff that they preach. And if you don't do that stuff, then you're a hypocrite. I'm sorry. Like, it's just, not that it matters to these people. Everyone's a fucking hypocrite and nobody gives a shit anymore. So it's like, but to me, yeah, it's hard to be neutral about controversial topics. You know what I mean? Because how do you talk about those things? And like, you told me about, YouTube taking down videos and, you're just talking about things. It's not like you're coming out with any sort of fervor, like, oh, this works or this doesn't work. Or, it's like, why can't we just talk about the different therapeutics or medicines and like just kind of in a neutral way, not saying that they work or they don't work, but talk about the fact that people are talking about them. It's like, it's weird that like you get into this area where then you can just get stuff removed for just simply trying to be neutral and assess things. And I think that's like what you're talking about. That is a chilling effect on speech that on its own will cause people to self-censor and be like, oh, well, I'm just not going to go there for fear that, yeah, my content will get just taken down by the overlords.
Maybe I'm just an asshole, but whenever I start hearing I think the reasoning behind censoring things is you don't obviously want a whole bunch of people following like a cult type thing and then getting tricked into some ways. But then where it's never that though. Like I can still watch a Taliban video of a person getting his head chopped off on fucking YouTube, but then medical just things that people did to themselves is wrong. Like I can watch a dude shove a bowling pin up his ass and expand his asshole out 3 sizes, and that's still
It's,
available.
it's for your protection.
It's for my protection. And I think
That's
this is where I take it as an insult is the fact of like you're not giving me the intelligence that I have when it comes to just being able to decipher out information for myself. And I'm the type of person where I have buddies that are 9/11 conspiracy people or 9/11 truthers. And they talk about, you don't think this was a staged bombing? And I've researched into it. And then I'll say, no, it's not. And I'll talk about a bunch of different things and a bunch of different factors and stuff. And then I have a person that says 9/11 really did happen. And I go, yeah, but did you know? But and then I'll just go to the conspiracy side. It's not that
yeah.
I don't know if it's just my personality, but I think it's just an expansion of thought about suggesting things and bringing things up. And this is what probably gets me upset most about like the UFO community is that like I like the ideas of talking about aliens, and it's really crazy how they're putting all this stuff in reports and stuff, but nobody's ever given me like a specific article to look at. They're always like, well, I heard this and this from a friend of a guy who knew a guy who knew a person that he picked up and gave him gas one time. And then I'm like, well, what do we can you give me some like logical evidence behind it? It's kind of like the Bigfoot shit. They make
Yeah.
it so kind of ridiculous and crazy where nobody's going to take it seriously or put it at face value. Nothing is ever face value. Everything is
Yeah.
always hidden in lies and deceit. And I think that's where the situation that we're in kind of now is the world. People wonder why everyone's so interested in politics or everyone's so interested in global issues. Is because for so long they told you the world's going to end tomorrow if we don't worry about climate change. Well, then 100 fucking years later, the world's still fucking here, and now we're starting to deal with some shit. It's like, well, how are we going to trust you that the world's going to end tomorrow if you've been telling me for 100 years it's going to end tomorrow?
Well, yeah, and like to that point, it's like and not to say that they're wrong, and obviously some predictions have been wrong, but maybe the climate is changing. Maybe we are contributing to it on a grand scale, and and all that being true, um, I don't necessarily think that that's an excuse for like the collectivism that they promote with it. Like I still think it's individual responsibility. So, um, if we can't get it together, like the answer is in my mind, it's like people always, and this is again like with going back to Bush and like the authoritarianism there. It's like the answer they always turn to authoritarianism when it's about protection and safety. Oh, we're going to do it. We need to keep everyone safe. We need to protect everyone. So we need these sweeping authoritarian policies because people just simply aren't responsible enough to do it themselves. And we can't trust people to do it themselves. So we need authority to come in and it's just such a poisoned way
If
of
you really
thinking.
cared about
And
people,
you just
wouldn't you
hate
should
people
well,
if you think that way. You
if
know
you
what I mean?
if you really care about saving people's lives, why don't you look at the epidemic of crack or epidemic of all these drugs that are littered through the streets where kids my age are dying of opioid overdoses? You know what I mean? Like you start to
Mhm.
wonder like what and then I look at like well the government does throw a lot of money into it, but they don't watch where the fucking money goes. Like it's kind of like the unemployment thing ended. Then everyone's like scattering to get a job when before every place was looking to hire employees where you could walk into a job interview and be like, how much do you guys charge an hour? And they'll be like, well, it's going to be $12 an hour. And you're like, how about 18? And they're like, okay, because they don't have anybody. And then now
Mhm.
they're cutting off unemployment. It's like, yeah, because you literally incentivize people that they can just stay at home and get paid more than they would if they were busting their ass working at a fucking shitty job. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with the homeless epidemic. Those people get paid, some people in LA get paid $200,000 a year to help out with the homeless population. You're not incentivizing them to end the homeless thing. It's like being a therapist. You
Yeah.
you never have to worry about being out of the job because everyone always needs a mental health check.
Yeah, it's a whole cycle. That's what kind of like and what I've pointed out sometimes and try to point out as often as you can, right? When you see it, it's like these sort of ecosystems that form out of sort of social issues that they kind of like you're saying they just end up perpetuating the problem because there's careers in it for people, and there's opportunity um to like sort of just pad resumes and like so for like a lot of these like activist types and you know government like lifers, people that sort of stay in the government, like a lot of the times through connections and stuff, people kind of find these sort of cushy jobs where they're like, oh, you're on the board of some like, nonprofit that helps the homeless, but, they actually make all these, decent salaries for all the staff and all the volunteers come out and try and do stuff, but it's all kind of like, performative in the end, a lot of it, and some of it actually does reach people, but most of the time, yeah, like you're saying, it's just like it's about careers and salaries for certain people. And it's interesting the places that you see those ecosystems pop up. And a lot of times they're around, like, things people can use as a sort of a shield from criticism, right? Because they're like, oh, you speak out against it. You're like, I think you're kind of doing some shady stuff there. They're like, oh, well, you're against helping the homeless. It's like, well, no. They're like, well, that's what we're doing, and so it's kind of like they use those sort of like shitty social issues and hide behind that. So it's like you can't question them in their career and what they're doing, even though they don't year in year out, they're not solving the issue. It's only getting worse. It's like, well, what are you doing about it? You know?
Would you be against just all technology, like in the year 2000 when they thought all technology was going to crash? Would you be against that having now? Because I've started to think about it. Like, how many people would, like, without any politics, how many people would just be fucking mindless all goddamn day because they have nothing to tweet about? You know what I mean? Like, I start to wonder, like, obviously, you see, I see the drum set in the background that you have. That's probably a good way to funnel out a lot and express a lot of the stuff, because when you're talking about subjects like this, or you're diving into history and you're learning about gruesome topics, or you're learning about whatever, you start to get a little fucking mindless. Like, I went downstairs and just started painting for fucking a week and a half because I just didn't want to deal with politics anymore. I was like, I'm gonna watch Bob Ross and get some fucking happy trees everywhere. And I'm not bad at it. I'm pretty good at it. I'll just send you a photo.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Like, that, like you're saying, creative outlets are like super helpful. And like, and too, back to like the whole thing with collectivism, they're using it with the virus too, so it's like we focus on climate change for most of the example, but like they're using it with the virus too. It's, it's like the whole it's not about you, it's not about your freedom, it's like all this messaging, it's all very collective, versus like the individual, where it's like it's actually not the government's responsibility, like, to keep you safe. It's at the end of the day, because they don't do it, like that's not their job, like they're not going to do it. The whole thing with police response times and all those things, like it's really rare that like somebody in the government actually protects and saves your life. Um, so this whole idea of this whole they use science to push collective action, and to me, it's like individuals are really where it's at. In a lot of stuff. Don't get me wrong. Like there's plenty of there are times where individuals need to come together in a collective manner, but at the same time, if it's a just cause and it's not bad, it doesn't get bastardized and like sort of taken over by the zealots, then the movement itself, the collective movement, will be able to self-reflect. And when people question the methods, or be like, all right, are we going too far here? Is this right? The people in the movement, they're not kicked out, and that's what you see happening with a lot of stuff, especially like on the left, is where it's like people question the orthodoxy, they get almost kicked out. You see so many of those people that are just like, they're like they kind of, what people will call them grifters, and some of them I think are like, they just sort of pander to like, like ex Democrat, ex kind of left leaning people that are like, I used to be on that side, but they kicked me out because I questioned too many things. And like, um but that's not just true for that, it's, story. It's like that's the same story within any collective group, any collective action, or collective in general that pops up. But it's, so if you have that self reflection, within the collective, to be like, no, we're going too far here. Like I feel like that's usually a just movement, right? A just collective movement. When they get these people in charge of it that just fucking turn into zealots and just attack people, when they like dare question, hey, is this right? Because I just wanted to make sure, because a lot of the times it's genuine. It's not, if somebody's questioning or criticizing, you know if it's on Twitter, like we're not talking about Twitter, but like, in general, like if it's serious movement, it's like if people are doing that, they care. They've taken enough time to think about it, and be an individual and try and have their own perspective. And if you hear them out and approach them, with with honey rather than vinegar, like that, like you're way more likely to like keep things together, and also too, like, maybe actually progress. Because that's the whole thing people talk about with progressives. Oh, they say they're progressive, but they don't actually change. They just, anybody that questions and wants change, they kick out. And so it's like, well, that's not very progressive, right? um but anyway, I'm kind of rambling about that, but this is just something actually that's been on my mind the past week, is just, and seeing how that stuff materializes. It all comes from this quote from George Carlin I saw. Obviously George Carlin's fucking great, but he was talking about how he loves individuals and he hates the groups and communities and collectives they all belong to, because those are the most uninteresting things about people. What makes people interesting, like back to your point, is like the creative outputs. Like that's what I like to hear about people. Like, what do you do? Like, what have you made? It's like, that's what I like
I just
to know
sent
about
you a
people.
picture of my fucking painting I made.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All
To
right,
check
I'll
your
pull it
phone
up.
and Twitter. what I think in the future and like the next, like I think this political thing is coming to an end of a trend soon. And I'm like, I never know if I wanted it to end, not on the fact of how enticing painting or not painting enticing politicals are, but I think it's important to know like the way of the world and actually give a shit about like what's going on in the world around you. But I think it's gone to the extreme too much where I think in the next couple of years we're going to be seeing independent creators start creating their own platforms. Like Joe Rogan opened up a club. I wouldn't be if I had a bunch of money like Joe Rogan, I would open up my own platform where I would have just a free range of being able to express yourself on a podcast if you feel the need to do that on a podcast. You know, if you wanted to have your show and you wanted to talk about certain things, I don't like the self censorship because then it's blocking the way that you think. Then it kind of hinders the conversation. And I'm seeing way too many shows, much like my own sometimes, talks about a lot of these political issues. And I think it's important to highlight these things and also give a shit about this, but it can't let you consume your fucking life, man. Where we're gonna, I think artists, people that are rappers, creatives, musicians are gonna, instead of getting into the politics, I feel like they're just going to end up creating a platform or creating something that's going to be unique for everyone. Kind of like Bill and Ted's the new one, The Excellent Adventure, where they had to get a song to unite the world, something like that, not really uniting the world, but just making it so this isn't the trending topic anymore. We have TikToks that trend randomly. The political shit is always all over the place. And I'm wondering if people are just like, I'm tired of fucking like, cause me, I've been taking breaks off social media where I'm just like looking on it. Every time I click on there, it's a fucking political or it's a pandemic talk. And I'm like, eventually I feel like people are just going to get to the point where it's like, I just want to watch cat videos. And then they're going to see a whole platform where it's just cat videos. And do I want that mindless state? I don't know. But I also don't feel the need to feel like you can't talk about certain things or express the way you feel because you're going to be limited on the speech that you have to say.
Yeah, and like you know, I think you're kind of touching on something there that's important. It's like creators sort of need, I think creative people in general just sort of need to like kick out the activists from the creative space. And some people disagree with that. Some people really do think like, creativity and the activism are like really intertwined. They look at the 60s and they point to all that stuff and it's like, look, I mean, there's some necessary, there are like, again, there's necessary collective action, but at the same time what's going on right now is creativity is suffering at the hands of collective action. Like, it is the fact of the matter is, individual creators are having, their stuff torn apart and like, ripped on, and just kind of brigaded. You know what I mean? It's not into, it's like, again, you put your stuff out there, you deal with the consequences. But some people, that are they make stuff that, I find a lot of it to be pretty tame. But like, again, it doesn't have like, maybe it's just playing towards a sensibility, like, you know um that a certain crowd doesn't like. I know I'm being kind of vague about it, but I'm trying to sort of use catch-all terms here so I can. But anyway, like, you can just, it's really interesting to see how some individual creators will draw the like backlash on some stuff that's just, to me, is like really mundane. It's just like, that's like really tame. Like,
Well,
I don't know.
this
Creativity
is
should evoke emotion. Like, I really like stuff that's extreme and edgy and like really evokes a lot of emotion. So it's like, I mean, a lot of stuff gets huge backlash, especially from like, the right and the left. And it's what's funny. It's just like, that's why creators need to kick out the political like we should just be able to, creative people should be able to create and enjoy their stuff, um without the activists and people like kind of trying to come in and brigade their shit. It's just like creators should be able to stand up for one another regardless of the politics. You know what I mean? That's what I'm kind of saying. It's just like, but there's too many of them, I think, that are consumed now within either side, because some guys like become like sort of these free speech warriors, and it's like, I don't want to become that guy. You know what I mean? Like, that's always just like banging on about free speech, because I mean, it's an important thing, but at the end of the day, it's like, I don't think that's not my creative, like, vision. It's like to be a free speech person. Like, I do music, like that's what I like. But I think free speech and expression are tied to me being able to express myself creatively. So it's like they are kind of connected in that way. So I will speak to it, and that's really where a lot of my stuff comes from. Like like that's why, like, yeah, First Amendment, and privacy, your ability to like create and do stuff within your own privacy of your own home, because a lot of controversial and creative create controversial art throughout history uh, draws the anger of authority. And so, if the authorities are able to just like look into everybody's lives with impunity and see what everyone's working on, and somebody's working on something that's particularly controversial or something, the government can like pressure them. In a sort of dystopian scenario, could like pressure or suppress somebody's creativity because it goes against them, and like that. So to me, that's how all the issues tie back to what to me and my creative vision, right? So that's the only real reason why I get involved in politics. It's the only reason where I really want to talk about it. But then it's funny though, because you scratch that little surface of that free speech sort of privacy issue, and you see all of the invasiveness and the bastardization of it, and like it's this whole big thing that you get into, and it's just like, man, you really can't just focus on like that one little thing, right? It's all connected. You open one thing up and boom, that's all tied to other stuff, and then now you're fucking involved, you're in the middle of politics, right? And
Well,
that's how
none
you
of
that's
it's
how it happens.
an information spread anymore because what's information? Information is just whatever you really hear and then you reiterate, or you pick what's good and then you reiterate. But everything's bait clicking. There's so much clickbait out
Yeah.
there that it's ridiculous. You read something, you're like, oh my God, what? And then you click it and it's like this, okay, they just took that out of context and threw it this weird way. But everything always reverts back to like a certain side where you're like, oh, this is whatever, this side's garbage. And I'm like, man, it's just going to get to a point where I think eventually people are just going to get fed up with the whole internet shit and they're going to try and find a way to bring it back. And I know it's a big part of a lot of people's lives, but I mean, the mental age of these younger kids, like children that are coming up that have just been exposed to the internet, there's no fucking point anymore. Schools are open back again now. And there's like what there's half a class now because they're like, where's the rest of the class? Well, the rest of the kids just rather they don't feel comfortable going back to school. I'm like, because you haven't incentivized them to want to go back. You've given them the option to stay home. If I was a kid and I had to choose to go to school or stay in my house, I would fucking stay in my house.
Yeah, and I mean, that's you know
My buddy has a GIF for his Zoom profile picture, and it's his eyes blinking every couple of seconds and then looking his head down and looking back up. And that's what he uses as his pick during his classroom meetings. So he's able to
oh
do
yeah,
whatever the hell he wants.
yeah, yeah, exactly, just like trick the teacher. um what's interesting is the way technology's changed education. A lot of the paradigms around education haven't progressed, right? Like, there's still the whole centralized, we go to a location, we an underfunded location, with not enough teachers, and it's overcrowded, and like, it's pretty wild. I think there needs to be a change in just how education is approached. There's probably greater minds than me thinking about all that. And hell, any number of approaches to take to it. But like, there's something that needs to change there, because like school just can't compete, with like the ever expanding um arena of content and distractions that like kids growing up now have to deal with. I mean, I grew up like with video games. Like, I mean, those were always like a big distraction, but like that was the biggest distraction probably. Now it's just like with all of the content, the apps, YouTube, you know, it's just it's my mind-boggling. I can't imagine what a kid's going through right now, just dealing with all of the stimulation.
My thoughts is that there needs to be a class on life, and I think people always take it like, oh, you mean like paying your bills and shit. I'm like, no, no, no. I mean a class just on like the beauties of life, because you're not going to see them every single day when you walk outside. You're not going to notice these things. The first thing that's going to be on your mind is paying bills, not worried about like the color of the trees or the beautiful sky that's out in the air, just how a fucking cloud moves. Like really appreciating, like when I go outside and I lay like get some sun or something, I'm looking at clouds and shit, and I'm like, it's fucking beautiful out. Like I don't, I know like there can be shitty days, of course, but even then you could find beauty in it, and I think that's what kids need to prioritize on. But I think like that goes back to the mask in school. All the people that are complaining that their kid has to wear a mask in school. To I've listened to Eric Weinstein, an evolutionary biologist, talk about this, and he talked about how if you're not letting kids see facial recognitions, like if a person's going to smile, like I was watching the 9/11 when they were all singing the song, the kids were for the, they were singing the national anthem. They just looked like they were, no offense to the kids, but like looked like they were blowing something because they were fucking singing with their mask on and you can't see the creases of the face. So it just looked like they were like eating food under their mask. And this is important stuff. A child that you grow up to, I know, like, because I have friends that can't really hear that well. So they have to look at facial cues. And when you're telling a joke or something, if I have the lower part of my face covered up, then you can't see if I'm smiling or laughing. It's the same thing. Little kids are just going to grow up. We're going to have generations that don't understand facial recognition well. And that's coming from Eric Weinstein, an evolutionary biologist. But my thing is like he also mentioned this, which I thought was interesting, was that there's also a portion of people that don't really want schools to be open because their kid might not have a fair advantage compared to some other people's like so we know some people's parents who want to put their kid in excelling classes, and we all know some parents that are just worried with work and they hope their kid can do their shit on their own. Some parents think it's going to be at a disadvantage if their kid gets to go back to school and not learn online like the rest of them, because then they're getting a different form of education that might excel their student past it. It's like a fucking game with your kids. Like my kid can do a home run. My kid has gotten 2 home runs. My kid's gotten 3 home runs. And I'm like, it's very interesting to me on what we're focused on, where I'm looking at the concept of, I think homework is important. I know people hate homework. I hated homework. But then I start looking at the functioning of, you're really trusting that the kid can be able to be responsible for himself and do his fucking homework, or at least cram it in on the bus ride to fucking school that day it's due. Like that was a potential like good aspiration or skill to be able to develop. It's like, fuck, I didn't do my homework over the weekend. I ended up playing video games. When I got to do it on the bus ride and you copy somebody's homework, you still had to cram it in and fucking get it done. Whether you soaked up the information or not, it's another skill there, was being able to function in the last quarter seconds of the game when you shoot that 3-shotter. I think that's an important thing to develop as a kid. But now it's like, well, some teachers aren't going to give out homework. Well, they think all so you have more time with your family. I get that. That's important too. But at the same time, what about the kids that just go home and play Xbox anyway? Now you're not incentivizing them to try and find a way to cram all this information in the last couple of minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, education's and too, like you see it sort of translated over in like with a lot of this stuff with how they're dealing with yeah, COVID and masks, and how like the teachers unions are all, you know, it seems like the kid nobody really cares about the kids. Like I don't know, um, it, and two, like it seems like it's really interesting to see all of that happening, and even people, whether you're for or against masks, whatever, it's like in a lot of these scenarios, it's just being mismanaged. Like the messaging is like all over the place. The decision making is like seemingly like illogical in ways, and like I don't know, like I don't know what the answer is, but there's just so many, to me, like mindless bureaucrats in so many positions, like middle managers, that are just so used to just doing sort of these sort of sweeping kind of rules that, and it's just I don't know, I feel like the the area, the allowing for nuance and gray area in discussions anymore, it just seems like it has to be a binary. It's like either or, and things are just always framed that way, and I
You're
don't know.
talking about my personality. I'm a middle roader, and everyone's like, I fucking hate middle rotors. I'm like, what? That I'm not going to choose a fucking side?
Yeah. I love how everyone always complains about that, and it's just like, oh, it's like, well, you don't have the guts to take a stand for something. It's like, no, it's not that. It's that I just don't I just going to be honest about what I see, and sometimes that pisses off people on the left, sometimes that pisses off people on the right. It's just like I'm just going to be honest about it, and people don't like that because it's people don't want you to be honest. People want you to agree with them, and and it's what it comes down to. And I don't ever come at anybody like aggressively. That's what I always think is pretty funny about it. It's like and most of the time when people get pissed off, it's like it's when I'm being like pretty reasonable. At least online. Like if I'm being reasonable in person, a lot of times people respond pretty well to that. It's one thing I've always think is interesting is online versus real life. It's like I talk to people in real life, and it's like, wow, people are just so much more. People are so reasonable, and but then I talk to people online, it's just like, wow, people really suck. And so it's just like I think where you interact with people really does affect how you view them, and that's why I like the Carlin quote about individuals. You know how he loves individuals and hates groups. I think is so important because like when you meet individuals, you talk to individuals, like you kind of learn about people and like you can connect on a deeper level with individuals. You can't really connect with movements and groups. You know what I mean? You can feel connected, but like you know, it is a sort of hollow, abstract, superficial connection. There's a a deeper, meaningful connection that you feel between two people is a that's different. That's also a challenging thing when you have that with somebody, not just like a romantic, but like a platonic, somebody like a between male friends or female friends, like having a relationship that is healthy is hard. You to just slide into toxic behavior, and but you know it's challenging to be in a healthy relationship with somebody, and you have to compromise. You have to have you develop some form of empathy, to try and understand how they feel about stuff. And you also have to have some self-awareness to how you affect people, right? It forces you as an individual to challenge yourself. And to me, like that's what's important about human connection. Um and and when we don't do that with each other, when we only talk to each other through social media, we lose on that genuine deep connection because we're only talking to avatars, and we're only talking to people we can kind of just will project a group identity upon. It's like, oh well, that's a MAGA crowd, or that's a socialist, or that's a it's whatever, a communist, or whatever label you want to stick on somebody. It's just like you just project that based on somebody, what they're saying online. But if you talk to somebody in person, it's like, yeah, you get to know what they do creatively. And don't get me wrong, I do meet some people in person that are just like so politically minded and all caught up in someone's stuff. They're just boring. Like, you're not interesting. I'm sorry if you're just like, I'm an activist for this, that, and the other. It's like, to me, it's like, but like,
Well, we
what do
agree
you
on some
do?
things. Like we agree that if the police should be defunded. I fucking hope the police don't have any money. I don't want anybody coming to my house when someone has a gun to my doorstep. But like your social media is different from the David I'm talking to now. And I think with it's so easy just to be a different persona. Like if you looked at George Carlin, for instance, he could not be a comedian today in this day and age. No fucking way. Back in the day, yes, he was great, but the times were different. Times are different now. Like people talk about comedy should never. I had a comedian on the show a while back tell me comedy should never punch down. I'm like, comedy's comedy. It's funny if it punches up or down. When Bill Burr talks about like driving past an Antifa rally and just saying one fucking thing that he knows is going to get a bunch of like feminists pissed by saying, go in the kitchen and make me a sandwich, just because he wants to watch them all run into the street like Leatherface screaming and running around in circles like when he's spinning the chainsaw around. It's a fucking joke, but he's not. There's no, like, a lot of comedians are afraid to even do comedy down here anymore, and you think that's one thing we would appreciate more now, the fact that it's coming back because it's been closed off for so long. Like people are just happy to be out of the fucking house. But I was watching one of my favorite specials is Ron White's special on Netflix. um and I'm watching it now, I'm like, oh fuck, dude. Like you, a lot of this shit, like you hear it in the crowd. I didn't notice it the first time I saw it. I think it came out like 2.5 years ago around Christmas time. I heard him talk about how like he was mentioning like a couple gay references or something, and some person just goes boo in the crowd. He goes, oh no, I get it, I get it, I'm not saying anything bad. And I didn't notice that the first time I watched it, but now I look at it, I'm like, yeah, those things, they age differently. That was just a different time period to be able to drag that in there. George Carlin, he said a lot of real shit and really funny shit, but it's dark and a little bit gritty at times, and now a lot of that would not fly today. People would label him as something, and that's what the world is today. It's just labeling, sadly. And I think there's going to be I'm trying to look at the positive to it. As much as I like to talk about it's like the apocalypse and this is the best end there possibly is, but I think there's a positive to it all, which is the fact I think now people are just like, I don't give a fuck anymore. Like I could walk up to so many people and go, hey, did you see the news last night? What happened? Because they're just done. They're just over it. It's like me and you when you talked about, hey, did you see this? And it's like, no, I didn't. I didn't see it at all. I've been off political stuff for a week and a half now, and it felt good.
Yeah, dude. And like, you know, Carlin's you know, they still shit on Carlin. I mean, like I've seen plenty of people do it now. Like, yeah, they'll like, you know, shit on him, you know, going even go looking back on his stuff, you know, even remove the context of the time like they always do, you know. It's just like this stuff was relevant though, and like um you know, his trajectory was interesting because like you listen to his early stuff, and I'm more of a it's funny, I really like a lot of his earlier stuff. I tend to like his earlier stuff more than the later stuff because the earlier stuff was just more like more lighthearted and just sort of goofy, and just generally he was like meditating on like the idea of comedy, you know, and what it means to be funny, and I really enjoy that stuff because like as he got older he got a lot more cynical and like, you know, crass and like angry. And it's interesting because like it's like people a lot of times go in the reverse, right? Like they start younger, they're cynical, crass, and angry, and as they get older, they sort of mellow out, right? It's like he kind of went in reverse. Like he kind of got cynical and angry as he got older. It's interesting. And and don't get me wrong, I still like love like a lot of his older bits, and he has some good, really good stuff in there. But I always felt like towards the end of his life, he did get a little too cynical about people, and that's where, in general, I think it just came from, you know, being an old man, you know, and everything getting crazy.
I think it was just
Um,
about being famous because how many people there are plenty of people that are famous have horrible stories of like who would want to be fucking famous is because you just interact with a whole new crowd of people. You know, me and you, if we ended up becoming like these number one hits all over the news or whatever, all over the internet or whatever, I don't think we'd want that because it'd be cool to have money for sure, but it'd be annoying as fuck never having peace and having a different audience of people coming at you. Like you build up your audience. Like for me, my show, for instance, it comes across everybody. And that's only because I have random guests that have a different crowd of views than the people that listened to the guests before. So I'm coming across these people's friends. So I'm coming across like feminists, where I talk about I have issues with a lot of people. Like some people look at my episodes and go, "There's a couple issues you guys talked about." I was like, "What issues?" Like the UFO stuff. Really? You're giving these people a platform? It's like, well, they're people that believe this type of stuff, and I want to hear them out, and I want to talk about these topics. You know, this is something that a lot of people are interested in because they don't want to get into interested into other things. But people say it's ridiculous you give these people a platform. I'm like, you come across so much hate where I start to see why people just cut out of social media and they're not like when I reach out to famous people and nobody ever gets back. I had Greg Proop's message back, which was pretty cool. My favorite was Bob Saget yesterday, liked my comment. He put up uh, a video clip or something like that. He was talking to someone from Full House, and he's mentioned something like from doing AFV to doing this, and I commented on his photo. I was like, "You don't remember me, Bob, but in 2004, I went on. I was the kid that played the national anthem by farting through a recorder," and he liked my comment. I was like, "That see, that's what I like is that a lot of people know Bob Saget from Full House. They don't know all the dirty jokes and all the times he spent when he made a movie with Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor, who lit himself on fire by taking freebase and fucking just trying to blow himself up. These are things where people look at a comedian or they look at someone, they say, this person's insane. I'm like, but did you see that? Like Tim Dillon's the best example. People, I love Tim Dillon. I know you like Tim Dillon too, but nobody knows about his like personal stuff. His mom being a schizophrenic who worked at a fucking mermaid place where she used to swim around all day acting like a fucking mermaid, and his dad being a failed musician. He had the craziest upbringing. You wonder why the guy did fucking cocaine and all this shit when he was working at a fucking stock office. Like you start to realize like a lot of these people like Robin Williams, Dark Past, you know, we didn't see that. We look at someone and we just hear what they're saying, but we don't know what got them to the point of how they think. And I think that's very important. It's not even having empathy. It's just about understanding that a person got to the place that they're at. When I see someone freak out on social media over something, I look at it like when I see a person or screaming into a cop's face where spit's flying and hitting their fucking forehead and they're just insane. They look like they're mentally unwell. Well, what got them to the point that they were at that level? Because no one just wakes up out of bed saying, I'm going to fucking punch every cop in the face.
yeah, I think too, there's some level of awareness that, you know, some people definitely come off as like having like some sort of issue, right?
They
Where
were
you're
taken
just like,
behind a shed.
Like you're like, okay, yeah, like there's something going on with you. But like guys like Dylan, I mean, like, he's kind of doing an act too. Like I think part of it, you know, is just kind of like his thing. But at the same time though, it's like, yeah, some of these people, like, it is no mystery why they are the way they are. I don't like to get too like armchair psychologist about some of that stuff, because like a lot of people really do that online, or just like trying to sort of like get in people's heads and trying to like read them and like
Dax Shepard made a podcast
psychoanalyze.
about it.
Yeah, like I'm not really about that. I don't want to act like I'm any sort of authority on like what makes people tick. Um, but like, I just try to like, judge people as they come. You know what I mean? So it's like an individual I meet, no matter what groups they belong to, no, designations, whatever it is, how they treat me is really what matters. It's like that's how I assess that interaction. It's like if you come at me aggressively and like a douchebag, it's like, well, I take that into account. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm gonna be. Some people are always like, well, you got to give respect to get it, and like that whole thing. It's like sometimes, I will be diplomatic even if I'm not being treated well, just to sort of get through an awkward social interaction. Sometimes though, if somebody's being particularly disrespectful to me, or somebody like I care about, and it's just like an inappropriate context, I might then say something and be vocal. I don't like to do that. I don't think a lot of people like to do that, but I think again this comes back to honesty and like, you know, being honest about what you want. And it's like some people take this way too far. You just talk about being a Karen, and like kind of freaking out on people in public.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, I'm not getting the service that I want here. It's like I'm not really talking about that, but you know, um, but in general, like I've talked about, like most individuals I meet, most people are cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some people really have a hard time maybe with that. I think some of it comes down to people's anxieties, and they're thinking too hard about themselves. They get really withdrawn within themselves. And I think,
You
everyone's got to
fight a
find a way to
perpetual
deal with that.
well, you fight a perpetual battle in your own fucking head, and then you expect the interaction to go that way, and it never ends up going that way. Usually the person's pretty nice about stuff. It's just hard because when you like I see so many people that will like follow and unfollow on social media on a concept. They don't like the stuff the person's posting just because they're liking something or they're involved in something. I'm like, I guarantee you talk to that person, they're not going to just strike up immediately about fucking politics or something. That usually they have a good couple minutes of chatting and understanding, or oh, I'll hold the door open for you. No dude's holding the door open for someone and just starting to scream about Trump. I mean, there probably is somebody out there that does that, but it's mostly like I think everyone's just trying to find a way to be able to like figure stuff out. That's why I'm more of a fan of people that push against the system. And like it's weird when you say the system, people start going, "Oh, you're anti-government, or you're a conspiracy person." I'm like, no, I'm like, I just don't, when I see the first article, the newest article, I don't just run with it and start labeling that as fact and living my life around it. You know what I mean? I kind of just, that's why I like Tim Dillon. That's why I like Bob Saget. That's why I like all these comedians that have jokes that are dirty jokes or abrupt jokes or crazy like Hillary Clinton's a reptile jokes because they're funny. I know they're not being serious, but I also know when they're fucking saying a joke. Like the John Stewart thing where he's running around and talking about the lab and all this shit. It was a fucking bit. And you really saw a lot of people say he looked like a nut job. It's like, yeah, there might have been some spectacle, like, hey, check this shit out. But it was a bit, it was a joke. But so many people are like, he looks like a schizophrenic running around on screen. I was like, man, if that's really how you feel about a guy that spent so many years that the government didn't do, getting 9/11 first responders the medical aid that they needed to, all those years doing that, you're really going to dismiss all that. But people only look at the basic thing. Nobody looks at the 20 years of what we accomplished in Afghanistan because it was all ruined in a fucking week. You know what I mean? Like everyone looks at those factors of things, and it's easy to, but it's all about the last imprint, the last thing that you say, the last thing we end the podcast on, which could be like something motivational to someone out there. That's what they'll take away from it. They're not going to listen to, I mean, they heard the rest of it, but that's the one key takeaway is always the ending notes. And sadly, with everyone's ending notes, it's never super positive because you miss the initial reaction.
What's crazy too? It's like I've heard so many creative people talk about this now. It's like they're like, yeah, if you have a podcast or you do anything creative, you know, if you get a job in corporate America, it's just like just delete all your stuff. Just don't even try and maintain both of those things, because if somebody like comes after you, they will go through all of your shit and just like find something. Like, nobody's perfect. There's something that you will have said that, even as mundane as it may seem to you, somebody somewhere can frame it in a way and remove all the context and frame it in a way that will get you fired, right? Or like get you, or so. And it sounds kind of defeatist, but I get the sentiment. And it's just interesting though to me that, like, yeah, a lot of people just, and so many people are like, well, if you want to do this podcast stuff, if you really want to do kind of the comedy and real comedy stuff, like, you kind of got to be outside of the system. You can't. And when we talk about the system, like you're saying, it's funny. Yeah, so many people think when you talk about the system, obviously it's a very nebulous term. Like, you could be referring to any number of things there. To me, the system that the real bad system, I'm not talking about just the inner workings of the government. In fact, I think the theory of our government, in theory, again, is works pretty well, like the theory, but the
For a couple of
system
hundred
that's
years
the
old is
sort
pretty
of,
good. For, you got me?
yeah, it seems to last. But what people have done is like they've gotten out at those mechanisms with the lobbying and stuff within those mechanisms, um, that are sort of have developed, like we talked about, their own ecosystems themselves, right? They're not. It's not necessarily just the government system. It's like the ecosystems of careers and bullshit that have popped up out of this. These self-preserving entities that you know basically only exists to prove their need to exist, right? Like, they're only out there. The only reason that they exist is because they have funding to prove that they're necessary, right? And they do this. They do whatever job, um, to show that they're worth something, and they provide something, which is usually just like, again, cushy careers for people to sort of like shuffle in and out of. So it's like, oh well, that administration ended. Um, Unfortunately, there's no job for you in the White House here, but here, like, there's a job over here in this lobbying firm. We'll sit you over here, work here for 4 years. Maybe the next administration, there'll be a job for you. So it's like, this is what they do. It's just a fucking musical chairs thing. The sort of nepotism and the sort of, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know, that sort of thing, that how Washington works. It's all very insular, it's all very incestuous. And that's what I talk about when I talk about the system.
I think there is more value in just, I know we both probably want facts, but I think we're both the same in the fact of we don't mind listening to other things and looking around and just seeing both perspectives of stuff. And I think that's more value than anything. I know a lot of people like teams, but I think a middle roader like myself, it's not a fact of like, oh, I have to pick a side, but I think it's a fact of like every side has value, every perspective has value to it. It's just about what you're taking from it and what you're understanding about it. I think you can get more, like we're saying, more with honey and vinegar. Well, more about understanding and just talking rather than challenging and then trying to cut off things. I don't really see a whole lot now that are really just people having conversations. It's always assuming what somebody said and then going after them for it, which I'm like, I suck at social media. And sadly, as a content creator, you have to be good at it to be able to do all this stuff. But I'm like, it gets where it gets. I'm not a person that really cares about being on social media because I know the dangers of it. And that's sadly that you're just going to be coming across you'll see a fucking 9-year old getting his head chopped off or drinking bleach. And I'm like, I don't really want to see that. I kind of would like to, my day just started. It's morning. I haven't even had coffee yet. I'd rather just fucking live life and see where it fucking goes. And if that means being off social media and I can't promote my shows, then that's what that means. I'd rather just be able to set up conversations, have this type of talking thing. But as soon as you click on a certain social media platform, as addicting as it fucking is, the first thing is something trending about something bad, or it's a fucking Harry Potter book.
Yeah, like, it's kind of interesting that, I don't know if you saw this, and I think this related to what you were talking about, But like yeah, like kind of being in the middle of the road. It's interesting because sometimes like I think about it. I'm like yeah, it's like just being in the middle of the road. Like what's wrong with that? I don't understand like why people have an issue with that. But like I don't know if you saw like it was like a week or two ago. Like Chelsea Manning made this post on Twitter about like Glenn Greenwald and was just like basically like trying to like call out Glenn for like sort of like entertaining kind of like Nazi ideology, like basically kind of like right entertaining right wing extremism and sort of letting and fomenting it and how like she would give Glenn back the $10,000 he gave her if she had it and all this stuff. And it was just like it was this really weird call out because it's just like so you're saying that you would give them money that so this person gave you money apparently and like and it and it was very bizarre because the way I took it was like it didn't make Glenn look bad. But anyway, so what Glenn did in response was like, look, he was like, I haven't really talked to Chelsea much since like she got out of prison. Um, but here's all of the communication that I've had with her over the course of the past, 5 years or so, since she was in prison and all that stuff. And you see their interaction and the way Manning is framing so many things. Like it's just like Manning, whatever ideology has consumed her mind, like there is no gray area. Like it is a total us and them thing. She's like, they call it like a Nazi Bolshevik, the ideology thing. I guess like, and maybe there is this proliferation of it. To me, it all seems very paranoid, like that there are like these vast elements of like sort of like right wing extremists in the United States. And maybe I'm fucking wrong about that. I don't have, but to me, that's what this whole push for domestic terrorism is. And all this stuff is turning that, the aim of the foreign terrorism mission on people in the US. And to me, it's all very, because honestly, it's like the people that we bombed and, droned over in the Middle East, that was on some pretty dubious intel a lot of the times. They're blowing up weddings, birthday parties, killing just innocent people left and right. Um, and then would claim, oh hey, we killed a bunch of terrorists today, mission accomplished, right? And then this basically what happened in Afghanistan. I don't know if you saw that New York Times reporting that came out on Friday, but basically it looked like they put together some intelligence that like the people that were targeted by that drone strike was actually just like some aid worker, you know, just doing you know, uh, aid worker shit. People obviously were like, "Oh well, we don't know that for sure." It's like, yeah, okay, fair enough, but does that mean that we needed to blow them up? It's like if it doesn't like the evidence that they had and they claim they had, it appears to not add up to what they were saying. This person
That's
had.
the fear for me is that we ended up doing something like what just happened, and then you see how everything was trending about the Pentagon, and then now nobody's talking about it and nobody's owning up to the mistake that they accidentally just did that and bombed and killed a couple of people. You start looking at like for instance, Muhammad Ali back in the day, he gave up his championship fight, gave up all this type of stuff, stopped fighting, all because he wouldn't be drafted and he was protesting. And he gave up his career. He went without his career for the longest fucking time because he just didn't agree with going to war for this. There was a football player that did the same shit. He gave up his NFL contract, gave up the money he could have went, and spent 17 years fighting overseas, dealing
Well,
with all that shit.
there was Pat Tillman who, he left the NFL to go fight,
I think it was that
and
guy.
he got killed by friendly fire, and they tried to cover it up. But like, there's a documentary called The Tillman Story that goes into it. They claimed like when he got killed, they claimed like it was like some heroic sort of thing that went down, but like they sued the government, Freedom of Information Act, and got documents that sort of proved that. And there I think there's testimony from like people that were there that saw it happen. Like it was an accident. Like I mean, it was friendly fire. Like I guess like Tillman's like group he was with were coming up on a position that another squad, police, whatever I don't know the terminology, had fortified and mistook the you know, the Tillman's squad as hostile, and they started firing on them. Obviously, that's they radioed them and told them like, "Hey, friendly." But by the time they got that message across, like they'd killed. They might have killed more than just Pat Tillman, but he had been killed in that interaction. So they tried to cover that up. Bush, Cheney, that whole crew. And it's one of those things like, yeah, I don't, I, I truly talk about this stuff, and point out the faults of the government and the things that they do because that's what a good American should do. It's like because that's the whole point of the country was like government for the people. So it's like if that's the case, then the people should be able to point out the flaws, and we should be able to control it and change it. It's not an authority. The government was never meant to be like an authoritarian thing, and so many people try and twist it and bastardize it and turn it that way.
Yeah,
And like that's
did you see the Evan Hafer podcast on Joe Rogan where he talked about even veterans aren't safe anymore? Like veterans used to be this like I had a buddy that was getting in a fight with someone who
oh yeah,
was
yeah.
and he talked about it. He goes, "Yeah, I can't hit him because he's a veteran. He's missing an arm." And I'm like, "What does a veteran have to do with anything anymore?" And it's the shift that's happened. Nobody really gives a fuck. Veterans used to be a safe thing. You can't mess with them because they're crazy. They went to war. Now, like everyone, like there was people threatening veterans, and I'm like, you really think that the veterans aren't going to step up and fucking beat your blue haired like ass down? Like really? Like, that's what Evan Hafer was saying. But then we saw Pineapple Express. How many people? Not the movie, the fucking operation where they went into Pakistan and got the people. Just making sure we're clarified because I know if I say Pineapple Express, everyone's like Seth Rogen. um, but when that happened, all those people that talked about how shitty America is and how shitty these veterans are, or just veterans in general, like crazy ass people that we shouldn't be listening to anymore and they all need to be put in a home. I was seeing tweets about this. Then that article was trending that they did that, and people are like, oh, God bless our veterans. What are you talking about? Like you really just I don't this is where I look at people like they're so flip-floppy. It's very, very hard to see what the next shift is going to be when it comes to where do you give a shit about the country that you live in? Does anybody give a shit about the country that they live in? Well, if you do, can you stop talking shit on it and trying to find effective means besides tweeting an article about something and just find a fucking way to help fix it? We have a giant epidemic when it comes to a fact of we all cannot get on the same page. We have people that want to wear masks. We have people that don't want to wear masks. I'm not understanding. Is the vaccine the cure? I don't think it is. I thought it just helps lessen the symptoms. I don't know.
And I mean, I think it comes down to like being constructive, right? Like I don't like it when people complain about something without offering up like what they plan to do about it or like any sort of solution, right? Like if I do talk about some of these issues, it's like I usually am trying to orient it towards like a potential solution. Maybe it's not the right thing, but it's like I'm trying to think about it positively, right? Because like it's so easy to just shit all over everything, right? And that's so many of this stuff right now. It's like it just plays to kids' sensibilities, right? Because you know growing up it was just always like the system, like authority just sucks, right? Like it was never like super specific though. It was just a general, we just know we don't like authority. It's like
I
they're
don't
always
like it
trying to
now.
tell, they're always trying to tell us what to do. Yeah, I mean I still don't, but like when I was growing up, like I didn't really know why, like as I do now, like I kind of can formulate and logically explain why, but back then it was just kind of like I just don't like being messed with. Like why are you messing with me? Why can't you just leave us alone? Like especially at school, like with friends, we'd be, hanging out trying to do stuff, and like they would just continuously mess with us. Well, there's this whole saga. It's funny in high school of just like it was a really mundane. It's a really mundane story, but the example of bureaucracy. It's like my first exposures to it was we used to always hang out in this place called the elevator lobby, and it was this like with like an elevator where for the a handicap person would could use the elevator to get up to the second floor, right? And it was like kind of like this little alcove, um, that like the cutout from the main hallway, and like we would hang out in that elevator lobby because it was kind of cool, right? You're off the main hallway, there's a little area, um, and so we always hung out there, and uh, we had a principal when I first got to high school, was seemed pretty chill. Never got messed with when he was in charge, but something happened with him. That was all very shady and weird. He got ousted. Um, Other guy took over, who was like a cop, right? So this guy was just like a big authority figure, right? He's all about authority, and he always complained to us about being in the alley. He's like, you all are a fire hazard. You all are standing here. It's a fire hazard. Like, if there's a fire, we're not going to just stand here and block the handicapped from leaving. You know, like, what do you think? What are we doing? Like, what do you think we're going to do? We're going to exit the building, and it was just, but it was just this whole, I have to exert my authority because I'm in charge. You all are a fire hazard, and he kept on about it. But like we had resist it. We'd just be like, that's stupid, because it was, and I think he knew that. So like he didn't really have much leg to stand on. But he would send like cops like to go mess with us. Like we had several cops. He tried, like older guys, like the school resource officer. He sent up there. This guy did not give a shit. He came up and saw what we were doing. He was like, it's like, I don't understand why this is a big deal. Like he kind of agreed with us. We're like, see, thank you. And uh, he sent a couple of these other older guys up at one point, and they were just like, yeah, this is not a big deal. And just told us like, hey, just don't, mess with people or be aggressive.
See, that's when you got to play armchair psychology, because I watch those skating videos where kids are skating where they're not supposed to skate, and they know they're being assholes, and someone just grabs their skateboard and knocks them off their skateboard and says, I ain't a cop, I'll fuck you up. And it's just like that person, just this is their one thing. This is the one area where there's no skateboarding, there's a sign on it, and they just want to make sure they got to protect this area, and they'll have to die for that. And that's what I'm like.
Self-enforcer.
Oh, God, it's fucking. We just had a crazy case happen in, I think, the state. It's my state, but it's like the city right beside me. And a guy had broken into a convenience store, was trying to rob it. The guy said no, and he sliced the person's throat. And fucking, he was missing for like 2 fucking weeks. And I'm like, what? I don't know with people anymore. I don't want to go outside anymore. Every time I pull up to the fucking gas station to go get an energy drink before my workout, there's always a person outside singing their fucking mixtape, and they look like they're on meth and shit. And they go, hey, hey. I'm like, nope, I'm not fucking answering. I'm getting in my car. I'm going to act like I have headphones in.
Yeah, dude. I mean, you see some of these fucking, like, that's why I try not to look at some of this morbid shit on Twitter, man.
Don't
Like,
stare at them in the eyes. If you stare at them in the eyes, they're going to slice your throat.
like I see some of this shit, like it's like one of this video that came out of Portland a few weeks ago, like this, there was like it was like a fight in front of a convenience store, and like this dude, like it looked like he was just trying to break up the fight. I don't know who, it was unclear who was involved. Maybe there was other stuff going on. Like there was tons of context missing from these. That's why it's kind of bad. You just see these videos, but this guy just walks up and shoots this dude right in the head. Just like straight up, just fucking kills him, like right there, like. And everybody fucking fled the scene. Like I don't know if they even caught the guy. Like all of the witnesses just fucking fled. But like, I mean, it's just like unreal. It's just like you could just be outside of a convenience store and get your fucking head blown off. Just for like no reason, of
There,
no apparent reason.
there was one positive thing that happened recently that I think it was trending all over the place, was Steve from Blue's Clues came back. And everyone's like, yes, Steve, he's back. And I thought it was like, I watched it and I saw him at the end go, I don't know. I'm sorry it's been so long, but I'm happy I'm here now. And he looks, he goes, you look great, by the way. And then he walks away. Everyone was like, yes, this fucking made my day. I was like, Steve left the show because he was going bald, right? Like, does anybody else know about that? Like, he made up the whole college shit. There's an article in 2016 that they asked him about why he left the show. He goes, because my hair was falling out. That's why he had a fucking baseball cap in the fucking ending thing. And everyone's like, oh, I'm like, no, he left you because he felt self-conscious about himself. If he admits to that shit, now he's lying to us all over again.
Well, that's what's funny about like Blues Clues and like all that shit was like, in my mind, I like
he was 24 when he was recording that show. He's like 40 now.
I always felt I was too old for it, like when it came out, and like a lot of people my age and even older are like with all this reverence and like they remember. I'm like, I was like that. Like, I'm pretty sure like the kids that were watching Blues Clues my age were getting picked on, like or like the kid, like I don't, or at least the boys. I don't know, like
When was Blue's Clues big? I was born in 97, so that was like kind of like a show for me.
it came out I think in 96. So
Okay.
yeah, it was like, man, yeah, it was like and by that point like I was like second, third grade, so I was um like that shit was becoming pretty uncool pretty fast. Like
But it's like there's people that
buff.
watch Pokemon until they're like fucking 24.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but that's the thing. It's just like, a lot of that stuff growing up, like there's social forces like, yeah, beyond my control. Like I didn't really understand it. I just, being a kid, just kind of go along with it. I remember Power Rangers by that age, I'm pretty sure by third grade, like Power Rangers were out of the picture. Like those were not cool anymore. Like if you like fucking Power Rangers, you were lame. Um,
Well, geez, my one of my close friends is a fucking Power Ranger.
Dude, like it was brutal. I remember like it being a pretty drastic, a pretty quick shift. Like the older kids in the neighborhood were like Power Rangers. Like that's so lame. Like yeah. And like that, there's other stuff though that was coming out that was like, taking taking precedent.
Smoking Smarties in school. He used to ground them up and smoke them.
Oh god.
You ever did
I
that?
remember kids snorting pixie sticks.
That was a pain in the ass.
Like that is just, kids, that's what we like to give the younger generation shit for TikTok, but it's just like, we were snorting pixie
There
sticks.
were
Like,
people that were writing Zap on their hand. You know what I mean? Like there was that shit that was going on. There was people that had the hole in the hoodies where the ending of the cuffs are, where they used to stick their thumb through. And used to
oh,
have
that was me. Yeah. All the way. I destroyed my hoodies. Like on the end, I still wear hoodies, but like, yeah, I would have like the entire like wrist thing would be just worn off, just be tatters. Like I was like, I don't know. I was just one of those kids.
How did you do that though? Like, did you cut it yourself or did it just
Oh
wear
no,
and
just
tear?
wore it out over time. Like I literally wore the shit like every day and like would just wear the fuck out of them. And so like I think some of it might have had to do with just like how long it was too. Like so like it would be like always like up like this on my hands, so then my thumb and stuff would help wear it out. Like
If you could go back to your younger self, like your third grade self, what would you say to your third grade self?
uh oh fuck.
It's a
I
good
guess
question.
get it on GameStop.
Mhm.
um I don't know, man. Like I probably would give myself some investment advice. Get in on Bitcoin, get in on
Well, I mean, if you had to give them like life advice or something that so some tough times are going to be coming ahead that you know about that he doesn't haven't experienced yet.
uh, oh shit. I would say, really just the craft, focus on getting really good at your music and really work on that, because I feel like, with anybody, and I think any creative person will look back and be like, I could have done more, and it's like you can always have done more. So, um I like to think maybe I would push my younger self to do more, in terms of like focusing, because growing up, there's plenty of distractions and things to draw your attention away from stuff that later you realize was probably more important. But you know, you can't live your life in regret though. At the same time, but being aware of that stuff can uh, help inform other people too. It's like help give that advice maybe to some people. I try to tell that to some younger musicians and stuff. It's just like focus. It pays dividends later if you just focus and practice now. Those skills will translate.
I'm probably going to end it on this, but what I would tell my younger self is that everything that you're worried about now or everything that you're going to be worried about in the next coming days is everything that's important to you right now, but it's not your whole life. It's not forever. And I think that's a lot of what I've heard from a lot of my friends recently that are going through a lot, much like myself. And it's kind of like it's very, very hard to look for that light at the end of the tunnel. But I think it's important that you kind of just stay the course and realize it might be hard in this moment, but the pain doesn't last forever. It gets through it. And just because it's in your face right now doesn't mean it's going to be like that forever.
Hell yeah.
Okay. Well, David, where can people find you?
Historical. You can find me on Twitter. That's probably where I'm most active, at historical. Uh, and then there's obviously YouTube, Instagram. all that bullshit. And there's links there too to like some of my other stuff as well. So like you can find any like some paths to my music and other things. But yeah, that's about it.
Well, I'll link it in the description. Appreciate you for joining me on another episode of Out of the Blank, and stay tuned for our next episode.